Hello and welcome to another episode of a Wicked Parley. Tonight we're going to be discussing space mysteries, and other anomalies of the universe.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yes, but before we get started with that particular thing, I just kind of want to give a brief little update as to the current monthly challenge. So in case you guys weren't there for last episode, the monthly challenge was that we had to eat meals that compose the same color, all the things. So this would mean that, like, for a meal, I had green beans, broccoli, spinach for a meal. Because it was green.
I don't know how that... I don't know why that would be a good combination, to be quite honest.
I'll be 1,000%. The green beans and broccoli, they weren't half bad. Yeah. You add the spinach into that, it was horrible. It was the worst element of that entire thing. So
oh no, that's no good.
It's been brutal. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's been brutal. Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna die by the end of this. I'll be honest. And of course it happens. This challenge happens during Christmas.
Social month?
Yeah, no, like seriously, like what is it with food challenges during months that have to do with food? Like, why? This makes no sense to me. And hi, host. I'm glad to see you're here. Hopefully you'll be entertained by the chaos that is about to ensue. Okay, so first let's jump into the topic. So the staff had created a list of certain things that they were interested in that were kind of mysteries. The first mystery that we're going to be discussing is a mystery that is pseudo-explainable. It is the mystery of Triton.
What do you mean pseudo-explainable?
Well, what I mean by that specifically is that there are a fairly reasonable, rational explanation for the mystery of Triton. And the mystery specifically of what we're highlighting is the fact that Triton orbits in the opposite direction as most bodies in the solar system orbit. So normally our planets move around the sun counterclockwise. Mm-hmm. Triton orbits in a retrograde orbit clockwise.
Wait. Oh, hold up. Why is it orbiting in reverse then? Like, if everything's going one way, why does it decide to, go through the do not enter sign on a one-way street?
Well, it's probably because Triton is a captured planetary body. It's not native to Neptune. So there's a few different explanations for how this could be. One of the particular explanations that's been given is that Triton is what they call a trans-Neptunian object, meaning that it's one of those big Kuiper Belt kind of bodies, and that those particular bodies sometimes get gravitationally attracted to, like, Neptune and are dragged into orbit around Neptune, and it just happened that the object was dragged in such a way that made it go the opposite direction. I personally don't subscribe to this particular theory.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah. Well, there's several reasons for why that might be. But I think the main thing that I don't agree with is the fact that it's just too large. Triton is a really, really big moon. It's one of the more larger moons in the solar system, and the idea that it could just be captured that way, it doesn't seem to ring true. I feel like something that big would probably either get pushed into Neptune or it would get flung out of orbit. It wouldn't fall around it, basically. So
Okay.
that's kind of one of my particular things that why I don't necessarily agree with the whole it being a captured trans-Neptunian object.
All right, fair.
There is another theory about it, though. The other theory is that there was potentially a large planet that was somewhere between Neptune and Uranus, and that planet was drawn into the system, and as it was drawn in, Neptune snapped up a couple of its satellites. Among those satellites was Triton.
Okay. And do you like this one better than the other one?
I mean, to me, it's intriguing. It's more mysterious. I definitely think it's more in the anomalous type of terms. So I think that this one, to me, honestly, to me, it sounds like it's plausible. I think it's, for me, much more plausible than just simply being an object that was just somehow caught up in orbit, because it wouldn't explain the fact that it necessarily orbits the wrong way. Or the opposite way traditionally to everything else. Because even the objects that are in the trans-Neptunian space, or, we'll call even as far as the Kuiper Belt, all of those debris still orbits, for the most part, the same way that all the planets do, for the most part. There are a few exceptions.
As there usually are.
Yeah, but for the most part, even the debris kind of also orbits in the same way. So why would this particular object be caught up and also be different than everything else that's suggested? So
Okay.
yeah.
So those are some explanations of, why this is happening. But okay, so it's a little strange in that it's rotating the opposite way. It's doing the wrong way on a one-way intersection here.
Yeah.
Why would this be important? Like, why do you believe this would be important?
Well, I think one of the main things is that it suggests that our understanding of how solar systems form needs some level of refinement beyond our current method. The main idea...
What type of refinement?
Well, the main idea is that most stars, when they are early in their formation, they have a disk of material around them, and that eventually coalesces into spheroids and other objects, and they kind of crash into one another, eventually becoming planetary bodies and planets themselves. And the material that gets used up this way is either ejected out of the system, or it's blown inwards, or it creates its own subsystem of stuff. You could say the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud are examples of this particular process in our neck of the woods. But because Triton has this particular thing, if it proved to be that Triton came from outside the solar system, right, it was not made here, then it means that it was a captured body, which is kind of unique and crazy in and of itself, right? But then it would of course ask the question, how does something that travels from one solar system to another get here, and how did it decelerate to such an extent that it could be captured by Neptune? Yeah. So it's like
it's just like if it flung that far.
Yeah.
Why would it stop?
Exactly. It would have a pretty thing. There was a mysterious kind of asteroid called Aoumuamua or something like that, or Oumuamua. I don't know. It's a Hawaiian name. I'm terrible at pronouncing these things. But it was this weird lopsided, almost like a potato that flipped through space, and it whipped by the system in like a couple of days, like the entire solar system. So to me, it was a pretty fast-moving object in order for it to have escaped its home world. So the question is how could something like that, be slowed down? Well, there might be something we don't understand about the early formation. The other thing that could also be is that there might be some sort of weird kind of rare event that could have happened that also could explain this. But both of those kind of date back to a fundamental understanding of actual space itself and the way in which the solar system is formed.
Okay. So that's a lot to think about.
Yes, it is.
So those are some explanations about Triton, why the heck it's doing this. Besides the fact that it, for one, rotates in the opposite direction here, what are some other interesting things about Triton, if you had to name only a few things?
Well, I mean, I think the most obvious is the fact that it has geysers.
What type of geysers?
Well, I think they're nitrogen. They're like these black streaks that, some of the probes that have been able to look at it have noticed. And the weirdest part about it is that these geysers shoot directly up and then bend at a 90 degree angle to the left.
What makes it hit? Did it just... You would think if it hit a barrier, it would go, explode kind of in a radial. So why does it just go straight to the left? Oh, okay. Or right, I don't know.
Left. It's left.
Left.
Yeah.
Why would it go... directly only left.
So no one really knows 100%. There's a couple ideas that have been, yeah. There's a couple different ideas that have been put forth. The first idea is that there's some sort of like gravitational effect, some sort of influence that is creating this kind of drag that causes things that get to a certain point to just kind of like shear to the left. Another one that has been suggested is perhaps it's an interaction with Neptune's electromagnetic field. And another one is that it's been buffered by the solar winds.
Okay.
Because, the sun's constantly going, blowing stuff off in all directions.
Alright. Okay. Well, enough about that mystery for now. We can go in more detail later. Oh, I know.
Triton is such a fascinating place.
I know. I want to hear more about the geysers, but we can go in more depth if people want it.
Okay, yeah. In the comment section, definitely let us know if you want to hear more about that in the future. All right. So
come on, people, do it.
Yeah, do it. So the next mystery of sorts that the staff wanted us to discuss was the fact that Uranus orbits on its side.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah, it's a really strange phenomenon that is got a whole bunch of interesting potential field day theories around it.
Look at that thing. What the heck?
Yeah, I mean, like, one of the things that I think is most interesting when you think about how Uranus is just in general, once you move past the silly name.
Don't get me started on that one news article heading.
Oh, yeah, I know, right? That was...
Anyway. But yeah, so Uranus is, for whatever reason, on its side. Is it, for one, the only planet in our solar system to do this? We seem like a beginner question, but...
Okay, is it the only planet that orbits on its side in the solar system? The answer to this is yes and no. I mean,
that's an interesting answer.
I think that it has to do with what you call, what is the side, I mean, there's a lot of planets that orbit at a tilt, and so if you consider the tilt the side, then sure, there's lots of worlds that do that, but no world orbits at such a degree. It does at such a degree that it actually orbits at its equator. It rotates at its equator. It doesn't say orbit. It rotates at the equator.
Okay.
Yeah, on its side. So.
Alright. So that's weird for one.
Yeah.
Any reasons why this might be the case?
There is a lot of ideas that have been put forth by the scientific and astronomy. Oh my gosh, I can say words now, please.
We can speak English.
Astronomy.
No, it's just beating a dead anyway.
Astronomers. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Astronomers have put forth the idea that perhaps Neptune was struck by a very large other planetary body. A body that was so immense that it almost blew Neptune completely apart. Sorry, not Neptune, Uranus. Excuse me. Sorry. I'm mixing up planets now. My God.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But Uranus almost blew it entirely apart and then recoalesced back together. And when it recoalesced, due to having now the other planet's core as well integrated with its own core, created a lopsided kind of effect where it was pulled towards the position that it is today.
Okay. So it was probably... So one theory is that it's caused by a collision that nearly blew it the heck up.
Yeah, pretty much.
So if that's true and there were such collisions, why could this happen? Or why would this happen? Because as far as I'm concerned, there's a decent amount of space between objects.
That's a very good observation.
Like, there's a decent amount of space. Like, how does it just take that specific trajectory to
billions of years? No. Billions of years. No, honestly, there's a lot of theories that have been circulating about the ice giants, Uranus and Neptune. One of the more interesting theories is that perhaps they formed earlier in like closer to the sun, earlier in their lifespan, and that through a combination of gravitational tug and war between Jupiter and Saturn, that they were essentially kicked out of the solar system, but their gravity and the sun's influence was enough to kind of keep them in. And it is entirely possible that there was maybe another smaller gas giant on the other side of Saturn that maybe was around there, and because of the proximity to that gas giant and where Uranus fell, that perhaps the reason for the collision was because they kind of were gravitationally being drawn together because of the two bodies being strong enough to pull on one another. And so instead of pushing each other away, they were attracting each other slowly. So as they were going around and around and around the sun, eventually they kind of combined.
Sounds like two little snails going around and around and around before bing!
Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea behind that particular thing is very intriguing. It has lots of wide-ranging implications. Not to mention, you know, how exactly does a planet as big as Uranus or a planet as big as Neptune get yanked to that extent by just Jupiter and Saturn and the sun playing tug-of-war? To me, there's an extra force there that hasn't been acknowledged. That definitely would have had to play a role if that was to be true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of implications, if this collision can happen on such a large scale, do you think these collisions could happen elsewhere in our solar system, like farther, closer, outside of it?
Oh, almost certainly. I mean, honestly, collisions is part of like anything physical. I mean, if you think about it, right? We're constantly colliding with the Earth every second that we walk. You know?
Not that type of collision.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, if you think about like that, like, I know, right? Oh my god. No, but I mean, like, all things, like, technically speaking, if given enough time, will eventually collide into something else.
Okay.
And so I think that that's kind of where I'm kind of going with when it comes to this. So I would say that, like,
I'm just wondering how long it would take now too.
I mean, I don't know. That's
long time.
Depends on the object, depends on its location. I mean, yeah, it could be a long time, but I think eventually, right? Eventually, all things do eventually collide. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. Okay.
Alrighty
so,
then.
where were you going with that particular question?
I'm just wondering. It's just like, could there be a collision in our lifetime, or it's just like, eh?
No. Okay, all right, let me specific. Okay. Do I think that a planetary body could collide with another planetary body? And when I say planetary body, we're talking about a spherical large mass, not like an asteroid or something?
Would like a moon work?
I do not think we're going to watch a moon collide into another moon or anything like that. No, I don't think
we're
so.
not going to have it blow apart and come back together again?
I think there's a lot of modeling that gets done by supercomputers, and I think that information would have been, I guess, screamed. Hey, let's go send probes to this. Let's watch. You know, like, I don't think that, like, we're going to just suddenly wake up one day and go, oh, yeah, the moon's getting a little closer.
The moon's getting a tiny
moon's getting a little closer.
This thing.
Yeah.
You know, like this thing.
Yeah, that's not our moon. That's a different moon.
That's not ours. No, that is a different moon, but it's just like some moon goes kaboom.
That's Miranda.
Yeah.
Yes, Miranda. So the other thing, here's the other evidence. Now that you want to talk about Miranda, we can kind of like speculate on one thing.
Okay.
A lot of the moons all seem to be, I'd say, pockets or nuggets of information. And a lot of the moons around Uranus show a very, very interesting interaction between some sort of like massive, like highly energetic event. I mean, like take Miranda, for instance, right? Miranda is a moon that looks like it was a balled up, crunched up piece of like aluminum foil that's been rolled up into a ball. Now, there's a lot of speculation about the shape of this, right? But it's believed that this particular moon was struck multiple times and then broken apart and then recoalesced back together more than a dozen times.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I would not want to be that moon.
Yeah, I don't think I want to live anywhere near that moon. That moon's going to have some problems, you know? But the thing about that is that it means that there was something that was interacting with Uranus to such a degree that it was disrupting, impacting, and potentially destroying its own satellites.
Jeez.
Now, I can't think of too many things that would destroy something and allow them to recoalesce outside of a planetary collision. Which, in my mind, gives great credence to this particular idea. Also, you'd have a very difficult time explaining why Uranus has multiple cores. If there was no planetary collision, because I'm sure, as most people are aware, one planet, one core. You don't get two cores until you combine two worlds. So
Fair.
yeah. Anyways,
All right.
so I believe did you have any more things you wanted me to talk about when it comes to Uranus?
Not on this one, no.
I have a question.
However.
I have a question for the audience.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Ask it away.
Okay.
I
So
can put it in the chat too.
yeah. Okay. Cool. So my question for you guys is this: you know, if you were a betting person and you had to guess about why Uranus orbits on its side, what might you think is the reason? Do you think that it's because it was hit by something? Do you think that maybe something big yoinked on it as it went by? Do you think that maybe there was some sort of effect gravitationally where all the planets were playing tug of war and Uranus just lost? Like
Tug of war.
Tug of war.
Just pulls really hard, the other side loses, and just spins out of control and settles on its side.
or either that or it face plants. Yeah.
Bonk.
All
And
right.
it's just remaining there forever.
Yeah, maybe. All right. Well, I will look forward to seeing your guys' responses. We're going to go on a 2-minute break,
Yep.
and
See you then.
we'll see you in 2 minutes.
Bye.
All right, and we're back. Okay, so before we get to the rest of the list, I had a chance to kind of look through a little bit of the chat, and I saw what Host had posted about, is it possible Neptune stole a rogue planet's moon? Will the gravitational pull from the rogue planet cancel part of Neptune's to allow the moon to orbit Neptune instead of eating it? All right, the answer to that particular question is who knows? You know, honestly, no one's there to find out the answer, but I think that's an interesting idea. I think that it's very plausible that a rogue planet could have passed through the system, and perhaps Neptune did steal one of the satellites. It's entirely possible.
Mine now.
Yeah, I mean, like, I believe that to be a fairly reasonable idea. I think the only issue really when it comes down to that is that how do you slow down a satellite? Because that satellite is going to be traveling at the same speed as the essentially rogue world. And so, like, since both bodies are going to be traveling at approximately the same speed, you still would run into the issue of having to find a way to cancel the speed. Because like if it was just Neptune's gravitational interaction was the thing that disrupted the orbit, that makes sense. But why would it fall around Neptune? Why wouldn't it just smack Neptune or just get shot off in some random direction? I mean, when we've played the Universal Sandbox on the show before, we saw what happened to planetary bodies that get close to another planetary body. Very rarely do they fall around them. Instead, very often they get shot off in random directions, and usually get like a gravitational assist and start to accelerate. So So like I think that while it's plausible, it does have a couple problems that maybe we could have a discussion about at some point in the future, if that's something you'd like to discuss, host. And then the other thing that I think is kind of funny that I just want to mention is just about the fact about Pluto, about scientists doing it dirty. Technically speaking, Pluto has been around for a really long time. It's just got demoted before it had a chance to orbit after we had found it.
It probably orbited.
Yeah, I mean, it did probably.
More than likely.
Well, before it was observed, it didn't exist.
Oh, absolutely. No. We had to lay eyes on it before it existed.
Oh, okay. Clearly. That's the way these things work. Okay, got it. Okay, so as long as if I don't see anybody, you guys all don't exist. Okay.
What a way the world works. Anyway.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the next particular discussion. And the next one is going to be kind of a discussion of Mars, and a discussion particularly of Mars' moons. Now, the thing that you might automatically kind of be like, Mars moons? What does those mean?
Ta-da.
Well, one is Phobos, and the other one is Demos. Depending on how you want to pronounce it.
Depends on who you are. Tomato.
Yeah, Latin. What are you going to do? Anyways, you might notice the fact that those moons are, well, different colors. They're not weird. They're not normally like what we consider a normal moon shape, a spherical shape. They're more of potatoes and apricot in overall
One
shape.
looks like I got a chunk out of it.
Yeah. These moons have been something that has kind of pseudo-puzzled people for a long time. Now, some scientists, astronomers, have thought that the reason for those particular odd shapes is because they're not naturally born moons of Mars, but satellites that were collected or captured by the nearby asteroid belt. Now, while that is a very plausible theory that I think makes some semblance of sense, considering their shape, I think the thing that is most interesting about it is the fact that their overall shape looks like actually like parts of a spherical world. And so I actually would put forth the idea, and it's been backed up by other people who've also had similar ideas, that in fact they're actually fragments of one moon.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that they're actually fragments of one moon, that the moon got broken apart in some sort of major collision, or maybe it got too close to a large planetary body as it was passing by, and
something
the moon
like
broke
this?
up. Yes, yeah, something like that.
Okay.
And-
Bye moon.
Yeah,
Going.
and that the moon didn't have enough gravity to recoalesce back into a spherical roid, so the two bigger objects, or the biggest of the objects, still stayed around, but the rest of the fragments probably fell down upon Mars over time.
Okay.
Or the solar winds blew the objects out of Mars's influence.
Okay.
So
That is really weird to think about.
yeah, and so I think that's like one of those kind of interesting things. And while this isn't directly speaking about Mars, it does kind of point to the fact that there are some oddities in our system. Mercury is a great example of an oddity. Mercury, in my particular belief, is actually the core of a planet. It's not actually the planet itself. It's just the core, the remnant of a core of a world. So, yeah, anyways, but I think that these kinds of destructive events probably happen all the time, and it's just because they operate on a time scale that is much longer than our lives and much longer than we've been around to observe. But I think if humanity or some version of it lives for perhaps millions or even billions of years, we'll start to see that these things as very common, normal things that are very explainable.
Okay.
There is some interesting things though that could potentially explain some of Mars's surface features though.
Hit me with it.
Hit me with it?
Yeah.
All right, so the big giant Grand Canyon looking thing, the Valles Marineris? It looks like it's the big
Kinda?
giant, like, you know, like a zipper on the side of the freaking planet of Mars.
Yeah, sure.
You know, so some people believe that perhaps that big tear was actually carved out by a collision. So some people believe that that particular thing was formed similar to how the Grand Canyon was formed in North America, where essentially it was through erosion and time. And that water erosion eventually basically eroded the whole thing out. And there certainly is water on Mars. There's liquid water on Mars. There is also there's definitely frozen water at the poles. And I think that it's plausible. But here's my issue with it. My issue is that there's not enough water present. Even if you increase the overall water of there by 5 times the amount, enough to have created that level of topography.
Okay.
And so to me, I would really doubt that whole thing was solely formed by that particular process, especially considering the fact that water on Mars seems to have fluctuated in its past, where sometimes it was around, sometimes it wasn't. So at other times in its life it was other times it was very abundant, other times it was not. And so, like, to me, like, that kind of erosion path would have to be very different. Now, you could say that the erosion happened through a combination of the winds and like the sandstorms and stuff like that. But I think the structure just is so massive and so strange that I feel like that's probably not the answer. And so the only other thing that could make sense to me, at least, is some form of collision, some sort of like thing that just kind of tore up the side of the planet. And if you look at the way Mars looks, you know, if you even look at the way Mars looks, you know, a whole section of Mars, one side looks totally normal, and then the other side looks like someone beat it to death. You know, like it was bludgeoned to death for some reason, you know?
Is that why it's red?
I don't know. Who knows? But no, that's the iron. That's the iron. But
bad taste, I know.
but like, there's a lot of interesting geology going on Mars, and there's a lot of geology that just simply cannot be easily explained, and I feel like that's one of them.
Okay. Alright. So have there been any other things about Mars that have been interesting, oddities, weird?
I mean, the only thing that I would definitively call weird, I mean, when it comes to Mars itself, probably, is the fact that Mars overall has a very strange atmosphere. It's a carbon dioxide atmosphere, and it's very, very thin. But it seems to, obviously, from the fact there was water ice, that the atmosphere itself used to be bigger. And it's probably believed that because Mars doesn't have a strong electromagnetic field, that the solar winds blew the atmosphere off. I think the main question is that, much like how Earth got its atmosphere, you know, how exactly did Mars's atmosphere form? Was it also through collision of gaseous and water-rich asteroids and comets, or did some other process help propagate its atmosphere? It's one of the more, I guess I would say, challenging mysteries that is associated with some of the solar sciences. And I think that's something that I really would be curious to know. And I'd also be curious to know if aspects of any of the Martian atmosphere ever made it onto any of the moons. So that way you could kind of like go, okay, this for sure is part of Mars. This was Mars, a piece of it at some point, or this is clearly foreign and captured. Like, it would be nice to see some sort of chemical composition that could definitively prove.
Would be nice to place some things.
Yeah.
we only know like what, 10% of it. We'd like to know even a little tiny percentile more.
We're talking about like 10% of the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, it's always better to know more than less.
Hit that slow buffering bar.
Yeah.
All right. Any other oddities about Mars?
Well, Mars has many mysteries. One of the main mysteries happened from an early probe that was sent by NASA in 1976. And of course, the thing on which I'm referring to is the face on Mars.
The face of Mars.
Now, the face on Mars has been this thing that has been creeped up and like in pop culture and was propagated through a good chunk of the 1980s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it do look like a face, though.
It does look like a face in that particular shot. However, more recent photographs have been taken, and have been taken many, 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 many times, that show that is really just an artifact of shadowing. That the reason why the face looks like a face is because the shot has half of it casted in shadow, and our ability to recognize faces is something that we are particularly good at, and sometimes we're so good at it that we actually make mistakes. And I think that is an example of a mistake. We have created
like 2 dots and a little parentheses.
Yeah. So I think that like the face on Mars is one of those great mysteries, you know, that people have created this huge, ginormous like mythos around. And then, you know, the thing I find interesting is, you know, if you talk about the face on Mars today, most people are like, yeah, that's not real. But like, just like,
imagine if it was though.
See, if it was real, oh my lord, the implications alone on that would be just ridiculous and crazy. I mean, like, good God. I mean, like, if it's real, what do you think? Do you think that, what's your inclination on something like that?
If it was real, my first question is, where did they go?
Earth?
I suppose.
Like, what do you think? Do you think they would, let's say they were real, hypothetically, right? Let's say, like, so an intelligent civilization that was able to craft features in its own image on a scale similar to ancient civilizations of the past, there's no sign of space travel of any kind. You think they made it off? Really?
It's either they made it to Earth or they made it somewhere else or they died.
Yeah, my biggest problem with the face on Mars is this, right?
Okay.
Even if it was real, let's say it was real. Okay, let's call it real. How did you go about trying to find evidence of this civilization outside of this face?
It's like, did it get eroded away? Did it get buried? Da, 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 da.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that, like, Mars is such an arid place and such a, like, desolate place that I think any evidence of it is gone. Like, there's just not... It's kind of like what will happen with Mount Rushmore, right? Okay, so, like, there's a few features on the planet, right, that are made by humans that show evidence of us, right? After about, I think it's about 10,000 years, right? I think there's going to be, like, maybe 6 things that show evidence of, like, human existence ever, right? And I think after about 100,000 years, the only thing that shows evidence is our trash. Like, seriously, like,
such a sad thing to think about.
Yeah, synthetic plastics and potentially orbital debris are the only evidence of humans after about 100,000 years, if civilization today stopped. So, like, the real question is that, like, even if it was real, how would you go about making anything other than, that's interesting, something used to live here once? You know, like, I don't know. To me, it's a kind of a silly question that, like, I think the people who were making those assumptions and making those kinds of guesses didn't have the privilege of the knowledge we have today. But I think that just because they didn't have the privilege of that doesn't mean that those weren't wackadoodle people.
Wackadoodle-doos.
Trying to make a buck with woo-woo. So.
All right.
So, yeah, anyways, that's the face on Mars.
Yeah. What's the next bit?
All right, so the next thing that we're going to discuss, and I think we're going to probably... Yeah, no, we'll see what we do with this. All right, so the next one is it's called the Cosmic Roar.
Okay.
Now, the Cosmic Roar is one of these mysterious kind of phenomena that, like, a lot of people have probably never fucking heard. They're like, Cosmic Roar? What?
Yeah, like, I'm imagining it's not just some cosmic lion going roar.
Well, I mean, first of all, that'd be very fascinating, because if it was a cosmic lion, that'd be the evidence of alien life. And I think be kind of bigger news, you know?
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting, but I'd be terrified.
Yeah, I think I'd be terrified, too. Because I'm like, what does a cosmic lion eat? Certainly not people.
I think we'd be the ants in its meal.
Oh, dear Lord. Oh, no.
Anyway.
Okay, so the Cosmic Roar, for those who aren't aware of this, was discovered by accident. You see, in the late 1990s, scientists were keen on trying to detect signals from beyond our system. And the issue with that particular thing is that it's very difficult to, for sure, go, hey, I got this signal and it didn't come from here. So what they did was they took a series of very large military-grade balloons and a whole truck ton of scientific instruments and basically floated that balloon up to the edge of space. And the idea was that if they got up that high, they'd be able to detect signals that were coming from outside of ours. They were correct. Unfortunately, the signals that they were hoping to find, they couldn't find. Because instead of hearing a bunch of signals from a bunch of different points, all they heard was a loud, very large, anomalous signal. And the signal was so vast and coming from all directions that it outpowered virtually everything.
Oh god.
And so,
talk about
like,
a screamer.
Yeah, so like that's why they call it the cosmic roar, because it basically roared over any other potential signals.
Lovely. I don't want to meet what makes that one.
Okay, well, there's a couple of really scary, terrifying ideas around about what that whole thing is.
Oh, I'm gonna regret this, but what are they?
All right, so one of those particular ideas was that it's essentially a sound that's being emitted from the edge of the universe, and that it is the sound of the universe itself tearing through expansion. That the expansion of space is creating a tear, and that tear is what's creating the roar.
That's a very big tear, because I know how paper tears sometimes.
Yeah, but imagine the universe is that paper, and you're
No
and
thanks.
it's like, and the other thing that's kind of crazy is that like the amount of energy required to do that is literally universal. All right, this isn't like being powered by some big star belching signals from deep space. This isn't like a bunch of objects or galaxies even, right? This is literally a universal size signal, similar to the background radiation that was left over from the Big Bang event. And so like this is one of those really powerful things. And the only other thing that might be plausible is that it is perhaps the collision of two universes, ours and another, colliding. Which,
That's also kind of terrifying.
yeah, it is kind of terrifying, because who knows what kind of physics are involved in that universe. There's no guarantee that they're the same.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of
Oh
kind of
boy.
sketchy
It's like,
things.
which one's gonna win too?
Yeah.
Like, we know how tectonic plates work.
Mhm.
One's going under, one's going over. One wins, the other doesn't.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of go through a little bit of a speedy version of the last one for tonight, and I hope you guys find it interesting. All right, so there's this thing called the Booty's Void. Now, before you guys get your heads, out of the gutter, okay? They're not talking about booties. They're talking about booty, like the constellation booty, or booties. And the thing about the Booty's Void is that the Booty's Void just happens to be a very large chunk of space that has basically nothing in it. Now, you'd think that there would be, on average, given the amount of material that exists, that there would be somewhere in the neighborhood of like about 10,000 astronomical objects in the Booty's Void. In fact, there is only roughly about 60 of 10,000 potential. Now, there is a couple explanations about the Booty's Void that's kind of like that explains its existence, but for like simple, for like the try and keep it on short, is that through the effect of matter being attracted to one another, it yanks material in different directions, and that given enough time, material will just simply be vacant in certain pockets of space, and so that's what might create some of these voids. And the Booty's Void being the largest might just simply be the oldest void that we have currently seen.
Okay. Gives it enough time to nom.
Yeah, it gives it enough time to kind of like, well, I wouldn't say nom, I would say more like material has been kind of shifted in such a way that nothing that is visible can be seen in that space right now.
The darkness is growing.
Yeah, it's also important to understand as well when it comes to voids in general is that just because we can't see anything in there doesn't mean there isn't anything in there. In fact, space is filled with particles and gases, so it's very likely the Booty's Void is filled with gases and particles. We're just nothing big enough for us to see from here.
Okay.
Yeah. So. Anyways, that's been tonight's show. I hope you guys found some interesting things. Hope that maybe you learned something. And if you guys want to continue hearing about anything relating to astronomy or just any other topics in general, feel free to email the show or message us or leave a comment with, hey, I like this and I want to see more of this. So, that's been kind of what's going on. I'm going to leave you guys with one last question. My question for you guys is well, what is your favorite mystery about space? I hope that you guys take some time to think about that. All right. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.